church? Hell no. Are you no longer feeling comfortable in church? This podcast is for individuals who are desperately missing God, but don't know how to find Him. Substance abuse, domestic violence, sex offenses, acrimonious divorce can contribute to discomfort in the church. For these individuals, church is just not an option anymore. Ordained minister Dennis Hall and his guests invite you to listen to this podcast for topics that are inspiring, uplifting, and will bring hope to those who just feel church is not relevant in their lives today.
I'm Dr. Dennis Hall, and I'm delighted that you're listening to our podcast today. There are so many things we could talk about going on in the world. I mean, we have this war still going on in the Ukraine, and now we hear that our military is actively involved in attacking this Muslim group called Houthis out in the Mediterranean area because of all the attacks on American facilities and so forth. So there's just a lot going on. And then, of course, there are things going on in this country that should be of great concern to all of us. And we just this week heard about the release of what's referred to as the Jeffrey Epstein documents. These things are being gradually released. I don't know if you followed this story, but this is a man who was convicted of sex trafficking along with his girlfriend. Went to prison and was either killed or committed suicide in prison. And now we have these things coming out, and apparently many well-known dignitaries, political figures, and corporate figures visited this sex island that he owned in the Caribbean dozens of times. I mean, I'm talking about people who visited there 50 or 60 times, and the public statements that we've heard from some of these people as well, they had no idea what was going on there. And we have some names that have been given to us by some of the underage girls that were groomed to provide sex services on that island. And so we have some information out there. And then of course, all of us know about all of the scandal in the Catholic Church and the number of cases in the thousands of especially young men being sexually violated by priests in the Catholic Church. And then we've heard about the scandal in the Baptist churches where hundreds of convicted child sex offenders were serving on the staff of Baptist churches. And I'm not picking on these two denominations because I'm convinced that similar things have gone on in all the mainline denominations of the churches. And then we heard about the things that happened to the U.S. Gymnasts, the sexual violations of the U.S. gymnast team. We've heard about all of the young men who've come forward who were sexually violated in the Boy Scouts, to the point of the Boy Scouts apparently seeking protection from the bankruptcy laws. It just seems that we're constantly hearing about children being kidnapped and sexually violated. We've almost become numb to these reports of sex trafficking on our southern border, which involves children to a large degree. According to a report in the Washington Examiner, more than 10 million people have been reported illegally entering the United States since President Biden took office in January 2021. This is the greatest number of illegal crossings in the history of the United States, and it should be troubling to all of us. This number is bigger than the population of 41 different states. And it's amazing. You know, some estimates put the percentage of of women and children at about 30%. Well, that'd be 3 million women and children illegally coming across in the United States. And, Amnesty International reports that about 60% of the women and children who make this journey are sexually assaulted. And I wish I could report to you that they were only assaulted on the southern side of the border, but some were assaulted after being in shelters here in the United States. That means that we're looking at numbers like 1.8 million sexual assaults of women and children as a result of our policies on the southern border. It's what's happening. Our arrogance, I guess, as Americans is, well, this is all about the bandits and members of criminal gangs and the cartels and others, including corrupt officials in the south of the border. But as I said earlier, just a minute ago, some of these assaults even occurred in shelters here in the United States. And so it's very disturbing. In some areas near the border, they have these, what they call rapist trees, where these rapists are hanging garments in trees like trophies that are referred to as rapist trees. I've even seen a photograph of one of those trees on the internet or on one of the news programs. Rape is so common. It's expected by the young girls and women who are making this journey. They're going and getting contraceptives before they make this journey to protect themselves, and knowing full well that the odds are that they're going to be sexually violated on their journey to the border of the United States. And I just have to ask you, what in the world is wrong with us as a country where we're just not outraged at these kind of staggering numbers, this kind of sexual violence on our southern border? Because of this, it's easy to despise and hate these sexual predators. Jesus even said in Matthew 18:6, if you cause a child who believes in me to stumble, you ought to have a rock put around your neck and be thrown in to a lake. And on another occasion, he admonished us, do not do anything to children that would cause them to not come to me. Do not interfere in a child coming to me. A big part of my research interest in graduate school was pedophilia. And there's a group of pedophiles who are clinically known as what we call hebephiles, who have a sexual attraction for prepubescent girls, ages 11 to 14. And, then there's the younger children under age 11. And there are people who have this sexual attraction to young girls under 11, and we refer to those as pedophiles. And, it's amazing. And there's been much research that's done on the impact of victims. What happens to victims when they've been sexually violated as children? And the psychologists and psychiatrists tell us that their brains are permanently impacted, that the synapses in the brains no longer function properly. And the younger the age, the younger they're violated, the more serious this is. And this causes them to be unable to socially interact properly. And so the consequences as these children get older, they get into things like prostitution and drug and alcohol abuse, all kinds of dangerous behavior that leads to a terrible lifestyle for them. And some of them even become sexual offenders themselves as they get older as a result of these impacts on their brain. So this is a serious thing. These children generally just don't get over being sexually violated as a child. And so there are serious consequences. In almost every study of convicted child sex offenders, it's reported that pornography played a role in their deviancy. And here we are in America. We're the largest producer and the largest user of pornography. One popular porn website reports that they have daily visits that exceed 100 million users per day. Those numbers are so large, we can't even hardly grasp that. Watching pornography in America begins at a young age. It's reported that 50% of the 11 to 13-year-olds in our country, 50%, 11 to 13-year-olds, have already viewed pornography. And those numbers just go up as the age goes up. 65% of the 14 and 15-year-olds and 78% of the 16 to 17-year-olds report that they have viewed pornography in some way or another. And then guess what? There is a disconnect, a total disconnect between what parents of these kids think, because you ask the parents, and 75% of the parents will tell you no, their children don't watch pornography. And then you go and interview the children, and you find that we have these high numbers of young people watching pornography. Parents, they really need help. They want help in trying to prevent their children from being exposed to this vile content that we call pornography. And so, while exposure to pornography is increasing in our country, pornography itself is changing. The Violence Against Women Journal reports that almost 90% of leading pornography scenes contain physical aggression against women and young girls. And Esquire magazine reports that incest is the fastest growing trend in pornography. Then we have the researchers at the University of Massachusetts who have reported that searches for teen porn has increased exponentially, increasing at an increasing rate. And then the Minnesota Human and Trafficking Task Force found that 46%, they found 46 published research studies demonstrating that exposure to pornography puts individuals at an increased risk for committing sexual offenses. So we have, this tremendous reporting about all of these sexual offenses against children and young girls. And we know it's tied directly to pornography. Now, America is the biggest producer and user of pornography in the world. And, there are some people out there, consumers of pornography, who somehow convince themselves, well, that's all fine, but, watching pornography does not affect me in any way. but there's so much clear evidence and studies that ties pornography directly to attitudes toward violence against women and children. And these studies report that those people who are watching pornography are far more likely to support violence against women. And some of these consumers believe that as pornography convinces them that women enjoy being raped, women secretly enjoy being raped. And, we know that people viewing pornography have much higher rates of infidelity in their marriages. And we know that the more men watch pornography, it seems like the more they need to conjure up images of pornography just to achieve any kind of sexual arousal. So it's destructive to a marriage. These men who watch a lot of pornography begin to ask for sex acts that they've watched in pornography and think that it's okay to demand this from their wives and girlfriends. Things like anal sex, which they say, oh, well, I see it on pornography, so women must enjoy this. And that's just not the fact. The Institute for Labor Studies reports that the consumption of internet pornography causes young men to be less likely to marry, having pornography as a substitute for their sexual needs. This is troubling. It's very troubling since, studies tell us that 90% of college-age men are watching pornography almost on a daily basis. Now, doesn't that set the stage? No wonder we're seeing people getting married at much later ages. The ages of marriage seems to be going up. Extramarital sex. Extramarital is one of the most commonly cited reasons for divorce. And again, we know that pornography consumption plays a role in encouraging extramarital affairs. Is all this troubling? Is all this troubling to you? It's very troubling to me. We know that today, unbelievably, 30% of all the traffic on the internet is pornography. Now, you may be listening to this podcast and saying, so what? And, many of us, frankly, are viewing pornography, and we've become so desensitized that we don't even describe the images that we're viewing as pornographic. Now, what do I mean? Well, we've got many television shows that contain what some people label as soft porn, not as opposed to hardcore porn, soft porn. Well, all you have to do is watch episodes of Bachelor or episodes of Naked and Afraid. And frankly, many of the sitcoms on the prime stations contain women wearing such scantily clad women and, embracing men in provocative ways, just on all kinds of programs on the TV. And, it's very interesting. So many of us don't even recognize, we've been desensitized. We don't even recognize when we're watching pornography. And, the important thing about this is all the studies, according to the website Medical News Today, those who frequently have exposure to this soft porn on television are less likely to have positive attitudes toward women and children, and are much more likely to embrace rape myths. The idea that this is something that women secretly want to happen to them. This all seems like craziness to me, but frankly, it's reality. It's reality. It's what's going on in our society. Today it seems like our obscenity standards have just been thrown out the window. Some people are now referring to nudity creep on streaming services, television streaming services. A Netflix show called Sex Life pulled in more than 20 million views in the year 2021 just because of one graphic scene of male nudity. People were gleefully going on to that and quickly going to that scene and even recording themselves watching the scene and then putting that on TikTok. What a great way for Netflix to market their program. Having people who want to see nudity streamed on Netflix, putting it on TikTok. You begin to lean back and just say, gosh, what's the world coming to? Well, I'll tell you what it's coming to. One of the most popular shows and one of the most popular streaming services is called Naked Attraction. Now, I don't think that's yet available here in the United States, but it's a popular show in countries like England. They speak our same language, and they're kind of a forebear of things that usually come to America. And this is a dating show. It's a dating show where they have contestants who are going to choose who they would like to date. And so they have 6 contestants, men, put in boxes, and then they gradually begin to show their body parts starting from the bottom all the way up to full male nudity. Right there, streaming on the television. The male genitalia is not blurred or blocked out in any way. In fact, there are close-ups where apparently these women are choosing who they want to date based on how their genitalia appears. Now, this is what we've come to in the Western world. The Federal Communications Commission does not, they do not regulate these streaming services for obscenity. And so already there's discussions going on about bringing this kind of show to America. Now, I want to just again ask the question on behalf of the listeners. So what? And all the things I've been discussing are specifically prohibited in the Bible. Specifically prohibited in the Bible. When it comes to rape or adultery or incest or homosexual activities or the sexual violation of children and even bestiality are all prohibited in scriptural teaching. I'm reminded that, Jesus, when he came, he said, I did not come to overthrow the law. I came to fulfill it. If you read the book of Leviticus, it's just full of the prohibitions about these very things that people are seeking to view through pornography, even realizing the impact that pornography is having on the violation of women and children in this country. So, you ask the question, why are we as a people participating in things that cause us to sexually sin? Let me just say, in this podcast, I've tried to make the case that pornography plays a direct role in the sexual offenses against women and children. Now let's just step back and ask the question, what does Jesus have to say about pornography? In Matthew 5:28, Jesus sort of unpacks what God meant in the prohibition against adultery in the 10 Commandments. What did God mean? And Jesus says, I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent already has committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, I know sometimes we've sort of taken this thing lightly and, talk about, well, I guess we look at a beautiful woman walking down the sidewalk and we've committed adultery. Well, the truth is that we've looked at her with lustful eyes, we have. But pornography is the extreme form of this. We're talking about, the essence of pornography is viewing women mostly being abused in sexual acts with lustful intent. This is the extreme violation of God's instructions in the 10 Commandments and Jesus's explanation of that. This is a serious thing. For God, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. Jesus goes on and says to us, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body go into hell. Matthew 5:17 through 30. So it's serious business. You may be listening to this podcast and realize that you're addicted to pornography. This is a serious matter. It's a very serious matter in the eyes of God. And if that's your case, you need to seek help. You need to seek help with your pornography addiction. And there are services to help pornography addicts. And you can find those services. And, if you share my concerns about the sexual violation of women and girls and young children, then you need to turn your back on all forms of pornography because it plays a direct role in what's happening in our society. So as I close this podcast, I'm asking you, I want you to join with me in this fight against this epidemic of sexual violence in our society. And now I want to thank you for giving me the time to speak to you today on this podcast. May God bless you.